What's up, everybody? Welcome into DodgerHeads, presented by DodgerBlue.com. My name is Jeff Spiegel. Special guest joining us today, Ben Badler, who covers prospects, international free agency. I think he's the best out there when it comes to international free agency over at Baseball America. A guy that we had on 11 months ago, had some fun conversations. So, Ben, I appreciate you hopping back on before the chaos of the January deadline hits us.
Oh, very kind. Thanks for having me back on, Jeff.
The reason that I reached out to you initially was, among other things, there's a guy by the name of Roki Sasaki that a couple people have started talking about as it relates to international free agency. I joked with you right before we came on. I don't even remember that last January I was talking to you about Roki Sasaki. And I was asking, I said, hey, Ben, it's interesting. The Dodgers seem to have a lot of money not spent. Is it possible that it's Sasaki? And at that point, we thought if he was going to be posted, it would be in the 2024 year. We now know that it will be 2025. You just wrote an article for Baseball America a couple days ago saying, laying out the 7 top spots you think he could land. You do have the Dodgers #1 on that list. So I'll kind of leave this to let you take it wherever you want. But I guess the question I wanted to ask was, what was the process like for you? Like, what are the things you're evaluating that bring you to the conclusion that the Dodgers were #1 on, admittedly, a list of 6 other teams?
Yeah, and I'd say pretty much all 30 teams are going to be or will want to be involved,
Yeah.
right? Like it's kind of a no-brainer. This is a guy who is, right up there, probably behind Paul Skeens in the conversation for best young pitcher in the world. One of the better young pitching prospects. I mean, if you want to call him a prospect,
Yeah.
technically he is subject to these international bonus pools. He's 23. He's really the same age, and he'll be rookie eligible. He'll be the same age as a lot of prospects who are still in, Double A or Triple A. But whatever you want to call it, I mean, this is a potential immediate, potentially frontline starter who's 23 years old and could have stayed in Japan for a couple more years and signed for, I'll just be conservative and say a $200+ million contract. Like, would he have beaten the 325 million that Yamamoto would have signed for? I don't know. Maybe it depends how he would have pitched the next couple of years, assuming it was durable and continued to dominate. I think he probably would have.
Yeah.
But now he's coming over and he's going to sign for what 95% discount
Yeah.
off that. So it's a pretty fascinating situation. I think part of it is the Dodgers, like you said, we were talking about it 11 months ago. Like you kind of had a sense, and we talked about it too, that hey, maybe there's something here where the Dodgers have a bunch of money in their pool. Whether he signs in 2024 or more likely, I would think 2025. The Dodgers also have saved a bunch of bonus pool money for their 2025 class. So obviously, nobody has officially spent any money yet
Yeah.
for January 15th, 2025. All 30 teams just have verbal agreements in place. Those don't really mean anything official until you have an official signed contract. So there'll probably be maybe 30 teams that are willing to just blow up all of these verbal agreements that they have with players throughout Latin America to sign Roki Sasaki, because this is a potential dominant #1 type starter who's going to come in for super, super cheap on a relative basis. So at the same time, the Dodgers have less bonus pool money than every other club except for the Giants. They have the lowest bonus pool, in part because they signed Shohei Ohtani, so they sacrificed $1 million. He's turned because Ohtani turned down the qualifying offer. He's a free agent who turned down the qualifying offer. Dodgers are over the competitive balance tax, so they lost $1 million. So they're working from behind, I guess, in that sense. But how one they could trade for more money, but I guess also other teams could trade for more pool money too. How much is money, difference of a few $1 million going to make to a player who's willing to give up,
Yeah.
which would really be like a guaranteed $200+ million if he just waited a couple years? I don't know. I mean, he hasn't made a ton of money yet in his career, so maybe a difference of a few $1 million or a couple $1 million does make a difference. But I don't know. Like, I don't know that anybody totally knows except for Sasaki, and he
Yeah.
still has to go through this whole process of meeting with all of these teams. Are going to be willing to tell him whatever he wants to hear to get him to sign with him. But I think it really jumps out, like, with them, the Padres, a couple other teams, in terms of teams that have really been preparing for this for a long time, it seems like, and saving that money in their bonus pool space to make a very uh, aggressive push for him. So I think those teams definitely jump out to me, and especially being on a competitive team. Like, if you're leaving Japan and you're, again, leaving so much money on the table, if you had just stayed and waited a couple years, I would think you want to go somewhere that you're going to be on a club that's competitive for the
Yeah.
next 5, 6 years that you're going to be there. And I mean, it doesn't get better in terms of the track record or the future outlook than the Dodgers when it comes to that.
Yeah, you made a comment like nobody knows from a financial perspective other than Roki Sasaki. Presume he's got some business people, agent type folks in his life who he's talked to. When you put together your list, again, you've got the Dodgers number one is the most likely destination. The thing that, from my perspective, as somebody who's not plugged in, like somebody like yourself who's connected to GMs and people in front offices and whatnot, I'm trying to parse through what are the assumptions that people are making, to the point you just made. I think there are a lot of really fair assumptions about Sasaki, which is money may not matter all that much to him. He probably wants to go on a winner. I imagine it's probably a benefit to have Shohei Ohtani and Yoshinobu Yamamoto on your team. I imagine it's a benefit that the Dodgers are almost assuredly going to be running a 6-man rotation. I
Hmm.
imagine it's a benefit that they develop pitchers probably as good, if not better, than everybody else. Like, these are all fair assumptions. And yet I read every person in the industry believes he's going to the Dodgers. And I'm like, are they just making the same assumptions I am? Or is there have people talked to Sasaki, and is there real sourced reporting, do you think, that connects the Dodgers to Sasaki?
I think it's probably a combination of both, right? Like, there's just some basic reasoning and
Right.
kind of first principles thinking you can use to make pretty safe judgments about just human beings in general, and
Yeah.
just the history of Japanese players coming over. I mean, a lot of players prefer to stay on the West Coast, right? I mean, I think it's a different situation than with Shohei Ohtani when he came over, because Ohtani was a two-way player. He also came over in the middle of a signing period, so it was strange. Like, it was a very unusual situation. But he was a two-way player at a time where, okay, not everybody even believed in him as a
Yeah.
two-way player. Maybe people want to revise that history now, but they
Yeah.
didn't. Not everybody did, and there was no DH in the National League
Yeah.
then. So if you're going to be a two-way guy, it really helps to have that uh, outlet open to you. And if you want to stay on the West Coast, like, it really narrows the amount of teams down in that situation. Whereas with Sasaki, I mean, everybody wants a dominant potential number one
Yeah.
23-year-old starter for pretty cheap. So I think it really opens up how many teams are going to be involved, and it makes it a little bit tricky to narrow down the field. But there are, both from talking to sources, and then just looking at the overall picture throughout the major leagues, like, okay, like, Oakland is on the West Coast too, and like they have spring training in Arizona. Like, there's okay, but is he going to sign there? I don't know. I'd be very surprised. Now you can rule out
You can't say
some.
it. I'll go out and say it. I don't think Roki Sasaki has any chance of signing with the Sacramento A's.
Yeah, yeah. We'll clip this when he goes to
Fair.
Sacramento, right? But, like, no, I don't think that's gonna happen either. But it's also been, yeah, because look, the Dodgers have been a very aggressive team internationally. Say the same thing about the Padres, right? The Rangers too. I mean, the Rangers not in the same. I guess they won a ring
Yeah.
the year before, but not as good of a major league team right now as those other two. But those are three teams that have been extremely aggressive internationally. You can look at past years' classes. You can also really look at future years' classes that they have and see, oh yeah, these guys have a lot of money committed for futures classes, players who are at the very top of the bonus scale, but they don't have that for 2025. So
Yeah.
again, every team can just blow up their pool and take it to zero official at the end of the day just to sign Sasaki. But these are teams that have done a lot of homework and preparation in what looks like an anticipation of trying to really go hard after Sasaki.
Are you of the belief that he's already made a decision and that there's not that any team would ever sign contracts or make agreements with players before they are legally allowed to, but like, do you tend to be of the belief that Sasaki already knows where he's going and a decision has already been made? Or do you think he's genuinely going to be posted at some point? Because as we record this, he still has not technically officially been posted. And that he's
Right.
going to then start meeting with teams, but of course, only in the legally allowed times when he's allowed to meet with teams and make a decision, or do you think he's already made it?
Right. I don't know. I don't
Okay.
think so. I mean, I could be wrong. I don't know everything, but it's not like in Latin America, these teams line up deals with players. They're going to sign players on January 15th this year who they've had agreements with going back to 23, 2022, going back to 2021, maybe even like 2020 in
Yeah.
some cases. And every team does that, and MLB knows, and they don't care. It's not quite like that. I think maybe, and again, I could be wrong, and I just don't have the information, but it's I mean there's a lot of other teams that are certainly preparing, like,
Okay.
hey, like, we're gonna try to be players for Roki Sasaki. So like, I don't think it's a given that he's going to any one team yet.
Okay, last question on Sasaki, and then I do want to ask about the rest of the system here. I've seen some people, I believe Keith Law was one of them, that has suggested that MLB maybe should have considered almost posting Roki Sasaki outside of the international free agency pools, in part because of the trickle down effect of, like, it's possible there's some team that thinks they have a shot at Roki Sasaki and ends up blowing up 4-year agreements that they've had with kids in the Dominican Republic or wherever. And then all of a sudden there's this trickle down effect of people that have been made pretty substantial promises don't have it. Like, do you have any real opinion on something, if they should have just sort of created a separate thing and said, hey, this is a unique scenario, and so go deal with this over here? What do you think?
I think the idea behind something like that comes from a good place, right? Because you don't you don't want a team to, or you don't want the all these players who have agreements lined up and have agreements lined up for years to then be in a situation where Sasaki signs with their team, and any player who has an agreement for more than, assuming they gave them their entire bonus pool, any player who has an agreement for more than $10,000, anything under that is exempt from the pools. Those players have to then scramble and find a new team like right before January 15th.
Yeah.
That's not a good position for these players who are, 16, 17, maybe 18 years old to be in. I don't like that part of it, obviously. I think there is going to be money still left over for players just because the bonus pools have gotten big enough to the point where there's teams who still even have uncommitted money left in their pool that isn't because they were going to try to sign Sasaki. It's just, hey, like, we're still looking for talent, and
Yeah.
most of the top players are already snatched up, but we still have 1 million or 2 million or whatever it is left, that we can still spend. So the players who have agreements, if those end up getting broken because they signed Sasaki, if the players are good, I think they'll still be signing for the same or comparable money. In some cases, maybe even more, because some players have gotten better and still have the original
Yeah.
deal that they had in place. So I think the thought behind it comes from a good place, but I don't see how you can have an entirely separate system for just one player, because there's going to
Yeah.
be other. I mean, we had Otani come over, so we're going to make decisions just based on how talented a Japanese player is or a Korean player is. Well, like, what if another the Cuban market has changed so much, but what if that happens with players from Cuba again? I
Yeah.
think you have to live with the current system as it is, and if a team wants to break off break its word with players from Latin America, then they need to deal with whatever ramifications and fallout comes from there. Like, I don't think we should be subsidizing one club and say, hey, you get Roki Sasaki, and then also you get to have all these other players
Yeah.
that you're going to sign from Latin America too.
Well, and it's worth pointing out, like, you guys came out with your top, I forget if it was like 35 or 40 international free agents, as well as kind of places that they've been connected to. Conspicuously, the Dodgers and Padres, the two favorite landing spots for Roki Sasaki, most places, have none of those players currently committed to them, I believe, right?
Yeah, I mean, the team that signed, Emil Morales and Ethan Salas and
Yeah.
Leo Dallas DeVry, like they're just not interested in. No, I
Yeah.
mean, they have players who are good players who are prominent players in the class who they're lined up to sign, but obviously this is not typical for those
Yeah.
two clubs.
So it's possible that, if the Dodgers were to get Sasaki or the Padres, who again, I think would probably be the quote unquote betting favorites at this point, neither of those teams, it doesn't seem like, would then have to turn around to some 17-year-old kid they've had an agreement with for a couple of years to say, hey, we're sorry. They've kind of just left their powder dry. At least it appears from the outside. So remains to be seen. But you did mention the Dodgers, it's not like they're totally absent from this international free agent class. It's maybe just they've stayed away from the top guys to keep themselves in play for a guy like Roki Sasaki. Is that fair?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, it's not. There was a year, what a couple year, or a few years ago, where what Samuel Munoz was their highest bonus guy. He was under $1 million. So, yeah, it maybe just depends on the year, where some teams won't. Sometimes you just won't be as aggressive as normal. But I think that this is a very smart team that had an understanding that, hey, there's even if there's a chance, like we think
Yeah.
there's a chance that Roki Sasaki comes over, and we think that we have a good chance to get him. Like it's worth holding back, a good chunk of our bonus pool money just in case, because the reward is ridiculous
Yeah.
if he's able to sign with us.
And now they've done it 2 years in a row. They have the most money left over in the 2024 pool and are uncommitted in 2025. So that tells you what a team like the Dodgers thinks about Sasaki if they were willing to, not just sacrifice potentially 1 year, but really it ends up being essentially two. So okay, I want to shift and talk Dodgers farm system prospects because you're
Mhm.
also one of the experts there. I said this offline. I want to give you a shout out. We talked 11 months ago. Most people, I would say, we're down on Gavin Stone because he had come up the year before after being a really highly thought of prospect and struggled mightily, while Bobby Miller kind of quote unquote surpassed him as a pitcher back in 2023. You and the folks at Baseball America remained high on Gavin Stone. You still had him in your top 100. You were like, hey, guys, come up. They struggle. They figure it out. I still think he's going to be really good. Kudos to you, Ben, because Gavin Stone came up and yes, ended up getting hurt. But, I'm sure there are lots of these little victories, but I would imagine, maybe this is just me and the way that I'm wired, but it has to feel pretty good when you stick with the guy kind of in the face of opposition and things pan out a little bit.
Yeah, it was good to see him bounce back the way that he did. At the same time, thought Bobby Miller was gonna
Fair.
be another guy who would have like a comparable season probably to what we saw Stone do this year. So it's can't get don't want to hurt ourselves, patting ourselves on the back too much either.
Yeah. Yeah. You win one, you lose one. Um, as it relates, the Dodgers farm system at the top is in a pretty interesting spot from the outside. I'm kind of one of these that I don't claim to be a prospect expert, but I like to read just about everybody, every prospect expert that I can. You've got a guy like Dalton Rushing, who um I would imagine is the number one guy in most systems and is knocking on the door probably as an outfielder. But then right below him, you've got Zyhir Hope, who's kind of hopping up boards, and Josue DePaula, who two guys who aren't necessarily close to the major leagues, but the ceiling seems to be all over the place. You've got Freeland, who's a shortstop who
Hmm.
feels like he's kind of come out of nowhere. And then probably a billion pitchers mixed in somewhere, depending on what flavor of pitcher you like from the Dodgers. So it feels like the top of the system now, Ben, is unique in there's a lot of position players, which it's been dominated by pitchers at the top, it feels like for a while. But B, kind of a combination of lottery ticket types versus high floor types as well.
Yeah, I think there's a good mix of talent, and yeah, I think especially they do a great job. Obviously, I think of developing pitching, and there'll be probably some guy who's ranked in the 20s or not even in the 30 who is breaking out next year as the buzzy name that everybody's talking about. But yeah, I think especially those first four hitters you mentioned with Rushing and Hope, DePaula, Freeland, like I think Rushing, Hope, and DePaula all have a case to be top 50 prospects. I don't know exactly where. I mean, I don't know what you think. Like where is Dalton Rushing going to
Yeah,
play
it's fascinating.
on this team? Is he going to be on this team, or is it going to be like Michael Bush, where I think his value is maximized by having him catch. I mean, he gets a lot of praise, obviously, for what he does offensively, because I think he's a very complete hitter and he deserves the praise for what he does at the plate, just in terms of the ability to make consistent contact, control the strike zone, drive the ball with impact. We actually had some pretty solid reviews on his defense this year, but he does move well enough to play an outfield spot, which obviously is going to be important if he does stay in Los Angeles, I think. So, but maybe I think his value is maximized if he is behind the plate. So maybe he does end up being a trade trip. I think he'd be a very valuable one. Um, but yeah, I think he's probably like the safe bet to be number
Yeah,
one in that system. But I also think Zyhir Hope has a chance to be I mean, he's already been a breakout player, so I don't know if that's the right label to throw on him, but I think he has a chance to be a top 25, maybe even a top 10 prospect in baseball one day. I mean, he just has about as much raw power as anybody in the minor leagues. It's easy plus raw power. And then you see that coming from guys sometimes who, especially guys who are bigger hitters who have longer limbs, more holes in their swing and swing and miss a lot. With Hope, it's more of a compact frame, a pretty compact but explosive swing with a ton of bat speed. He doesn't swing and miss that much. I was a concern about him coming out of high school, but it hasn't been the case, certainly in pro ball. He drives the ball with a ton of damage. He has a pretty good sense of the strike zone, too. So, um, I mean, I think there's all the attributes here to be a middle of the order monster type
yeah.
bat who, if he hadn't been hurt this year, I think would be getting even more buzz than he's getting right now.
The Hope stuff I read, I try not to get too excited about it, but when I hear people like you talk about him like that, where it's like, well, yeah, he has this thing that he's like really elite at and maybe one of the best. And yeah, normally a guy who does that has a lot of these drawbacks and he doesn't really seem to have any of those. And oh, by the way, doesn't swing and mitt. Like, part the question, which I'll zag a little bit here, like, how do the Dodgers keep doing this? Like, they traded Michael Bush and they returned Zyhir Hope and Jackson Ferris, who most people have as the top pitching prospect in the system, or at least in the mix. And like I don't know why teams trade with the Dodgers, honestly, anymore. Like, why would you ever trade if a Dodgers call you about your guy? Like, just say that guy's off limits. Give me the seventh guy on your list. I don't know how they do this.
Yeah, to get one of those guys would have been a strong return for Michael Bush, who's still a really
Solid,
good player. I
totally.
mean, it's a good trade chip to have. I think the Cubs are very happy they have Michael Bush, but I'm sure they wish they had at least one of those guys back. I think Hope in particular, because that was I mean, great scouting by the Cubs to get him as a later round pick. He was not like a super high profile guy
Yeah.
coming out of high school, but also a lot of credit to the Dodgers for being able to snipe him away from the Cubs at the lower levels too.
It feels like Hope and DePaula is going to be an interesting conversation inside of a lot of like prospect ranking rooms. Just because you have two guys that are highly projectable that aren't necessarily like haven't escalated themselves all the way through the system. We maybe don't have a ton of information on them compared to a guy like Dalton Rushing, who feels like we've got a few years at this point. It sounds like maybe you've got Hope a tick above DePaula. Is it Rushing, Hope, DePaula? Is that kind of how your personal top three would rank in the system? Do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I like
Could
it. It
Hope be
would,
first? I mean, like, is
yeah,
it?
that would be kind of the debate for me. I think the consensus would be Rushing, and the probably the safest answer would be Rushing because he's also going to play. I mean, he's
Yeah,
done it at the highest levels of at least of the minor leagues, whereas Hope has been. I guess we've seen it in the AFL to some extent, but it's mostly been in low A. He was hurt this year. It hasn't. It's a smaller, not a small sample size, but we just have a lot more track record with
yeah.
Dalton Rushing, right? So I think he's probably the safest guy to put number one. But again, I think Hope has that ceiling, and I really like DePaula too. Like it's no slight on him. Like I think he should be a top 50 prospect in baseball. But I also I just look at Hope and think, okay, well, is something that he's doing right now not going to translate when he gets to Double A or Triple A once he gets to the upper levels of the minors? Because that's a fair concern about guys who can beat up on A ball pitching,
Yeah.
especially A ball pitching right now is not great. But I just don't see what in either his swing or the bat speed or his approach, his strike zone discipline, his pitch recognition, what is not going to continue to translate when he faces upper level arms. To me, everything he hits so many checkpoints that you look for in a young hitter.
Okay, I'll get you out of here on this. Is there one name kind of in the back half of the organizational top 10 that when the folks at Baseball America are getting together to put rankings together that you might be pounding the table for? It feels like maybe more than others. And then is there one name kind of outside the top 10, quote unquote sleeper, that you either have been really impressed by what you've seen past tense, or you're sort of like, just keep an eye on this guy. 12 months from now, see where he lands. Is there one guy in both of those categories I've invented that jump out to you?
I guess the guy I'm pretty high on. I don't know if he's not like a sleeper by any means necessarily, especially if I'm on a Dodgers podcast. You guys, I'm sure know who he is, but Emil Morales is
Yeah.
somebody who uh, like for as much as the Dodgers have still left in their bonus pool, it's still been a really good class for them internationally just because they did sign Emil Morales, who, I mean, if you just look at the 2024 international class as a whole for the entire international market, okay, you've got Leo Dallas DeVry with the Padres, would probably be the number one guy so far. Jesus Made with the Brewers has been spectacular. We already have him as our number one prospect in the Brewers organization. So, okay, set those two guys aside. If you're going to rank number three, probably take Emil Morales.
Wow.
Number three, I mean, he did just win MVP of the DSL. Huge power, really like his swing. We'll see if it ends up being shortstop or if it ends up being third base for his long-term position. I'd say probably most likely third base. He's pretty big guy already. I don't think he has the true like quick twitch
Yeah.
actions and first step quickness to stay at shortstop long term. But we'll see. Like he's probably like he's still 17 years old. So,
Yeah.
but really, what you're betting on is the offensive upside with him. There's some swing and miss there that I think I'm not like super concerned about. Is a little higher than you'd like to see. So I think it may end up a power over hit type profile. But there's certainly it's a good swing and there's power there to be a 25, potentially 30 plus home run type guy in his prime. So he's somebody who I think could really vault up the list, and I think he certainly is somebody who's outside right now, but has a chance to be a top 100 guy in the next couple of years.
I love it. I love it. Well, Ben, I appreciate your time. I appreciate your insight. Folks, go ahead, check out Ben's stuff at Baseball America. I mean, the beauty of a Baseball America subscription is you're getting content from folks like Ben that you're just not getting other places, especially on the international free agency stuff. I'm not just saying this because you're here, Ben. I think you're the best that I want to
Thank you.
read on that front. And then obviously organizational top 10s, top 100 prospect stuff. If you're a Dodgers fan, these are all things that you should or at least probably do care about because the Dodgers tend to do well. Those are fun reads. Those are not depressing reads as it must be for some other organizations to see where their 10th best prospect ranks overall. So Ben, anything specific on Baseball America that you want to plug or point people to?
No, it's appreciate all the kind words. We're finishing up our prospect handbook right now. So you go to baseballamerica.com, you get a copy of the prospect handbook, top 30 prospects. So 900 scouting reports, every organization, or a subscription to our website too. It's, I think people think in their heads that it costs like, $8,000 a year or something. It's $99 for the year. So it's like eight bucks and change for per month or so it comes out to, which is I don't know. You go to Chipotle right now, try to get anything for that. Good luck.
Yeah.
But
I was gonna say that's like a medium-sized latte at Starbucks nowadays, I think.
yeah, you might get the double meat for $8 or whatever it is now. But no, grateful for all the subscribers we do have. But if you want to go to baseballamerica.com and check it out, would always appreciate that.
Awesome. Well, that has been Badler. We appreciate your time. Folks, thanks for joining us here. If you're new, please subscribe, ring the notification bell, tons of content coming at you throughout the week here on Dodger Blue 1958. Enjoy the rest of your day, everyone. As always, go Dodgers.